Marcus Aurelius wrote his most honest thoughts in a private journal, not to his generals, not to his friends. Because he knew something most men never admit: the people closest to you are the least qualified to tell you who you really are. Your friends love you. And that's exactly the problem. Your enemies see the mask come off. Napoleon's rivals, Wellington, Metternich, even his own marshals who eventually betrayed him, described his arrogance, his compulsive need for validation, his inability to accept a draw. His inner circle? They called him a genius until the end. It took men who wanted him to fail to accurately document what would destroy him. Wellington said, Napoleon was worth 40,000 men on a battlefield, mostly because of the fear he inspired. Fear forces honest observation. Friendship allows comfortable fiction. When someone is indifferent to your feelings, they stop filtering what they see. They aren't invested in your happiness, so they track your actual behavior, not the version you perform for people who care about you. Epictetus called this the discipline of perception, seeing things as they are, not as we wish them to be. Your enemies practice this discipline on you whether they mean to or not. Criticism from enemies carries information your friends are too afraid to give you. Schopenhauer spent most of his life isolated, rejected by the academic establishment, mocked by Hegel's followers. Their attacks were vicious, but they were specific. They said he was too pessimistic to be taken seriously, that his work was unreadable by normal people. He responded by spending a decade making his writing more accessible. The result was Essays and Aphorisms, his most widely read work. His enemies handed him his editorial notes. His few friends just told him he was misunderstood. There's a psychological concept called the hostile attribution bias, the tendency to assume bad intent behind neutral actions. Ironically, when someone is actually hostile, that bias disappears and the signal gets cleaner. They're not softening the blow. They're not protecting the relationship. They are giving you the unfiltered read. The Stoics called this preferred indifference, things outside your control that still carry value. Enemy criticism falls in that category. It stings. It's also frequently accurate. Your enemies reveal your reputation, your friends only know your character. There's a story about Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. His opponents in the press, and he had many, called him incompetent, weak-willed, a bumbling prairie lawyer who had no business running a war. Lincoln read every piece. Not to feel bad. To understand what the country was seeing. He used that information to adjust his communication, his cabinet choices, even his public appearances. He didn't change who he was, he changed how he showed up. That distinction matters enormously. Jung wrote about the persona, the mask we present to the world, and the shadow, the parts of ourselves we don't acknowledge. Your friends mostly see the persona. They've agreed, usually unconsciously, to participate in the fiction. Your enemies interact with the shadow whether they intend to or not. They poke at the parts you've hidden. And those are precisely the parts that will ambush you at the worst possible moment if you never examine them. Ignoring your enemies is a form of intellectual cowardice. Nietzsche argued that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but the full context is more brutal than the bumper sticker. He meant that the encounter with genuine opposition forces a kind of metabolic process in the mind. You either integrate the challenge and grow, or you avoid it and atrophy. Consider how Tolstoy handled critics of Anna Karenina. The literary establishment tore it apart for its moral ambiguity. He didn't dismiss them. He spent years wrestling with those objections, and it produced his late-period essays on art and meaning that reshaped how we think about storytelling. The critics didn't beat him. They upgraded him. Avoidance is metabolically cheap in the short term and catastrophically expensive over time. When you dismiss what an enemy says because of who said it, you're committing a logical fallacy, the ad hominem in reverse. Source doesn't determine truth. A man who despises you can still be right about you. In fact, his motive to see you clearly is stronger than your friend's motive, because he has something to gain from accuracy. Strip the malice from the message and you often find a data point worth keeping. The man who knows his enemies knows himself. Machiavelli wrote The Prince while exiled, stripped of power, widely despised by the Medici who had him tortured. He used that position, that outsider, enemy-adjacent vantage point, to write the most honest analysis of power ever committed to paper. He had nothing to protect. No friendships to preserve. No reputation inside the court to maintain. The result was clarity. He could see how power actually worked because he was no longer inside the performance of it. Viktor Frankl, surviving Auschwitz, observed the same dynamic differently. The men who maintained dignity in the camps were the ones who had already made an honest accounting of themselves. They weren't surprised by what suffering revealed. They had already done the audit. Self-knowledge is not built in comfort. It is built in friction. Your friends provide the environment where you can be your best self, and that's genuinely valuable. But your best self is not your only self. The parts of you that your enemies trigger, the defensiveness, the pride, the fear of being seen as less than you believe yourself to be, those reactions are the map. Follow the irritation. It leads somewhere real. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." The same applies to self-knowledge. A man who avoids honest friction postpones the reckoning, he doesn't cancel it. 3 things to carry with you. First, your enemies are not your therapists, but they are your auditors. They see the numbers your friends round up. Second, the Stoics were right that discomfort is information. When criticism stings, ask why before you dismiss it. Third, self-knowledge isn't a destination, it's a practice. And the practice requires opponents, not just supporters. The men in history who knew themselves most clearly, Lincoln, Tolstoy, Frankl, Marcus Aurelius, all built that knowledge through adversity, not approval. If this hit something real for you, subscribe. We put out one of these every Tuesday and Friday, no motivation fluff, no empty affirmations. Just ideas that are actually worth sitting with. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, send it to them. Sometimes the best thing a friend can do is hand you something uncomfortable.